Welcome to Study with the Best, the magazine show that's all about CUNY. I'm Tina Beth Pina. New York City is surrounded by water. On today's episode, we'll see how the CUNY community is exploring this natural resource with stops at Jamaica Bay, Newton Creek, and the sewer underground. First up, at 40 square miles, Jamaica Bay is the city's most expansive and fragile natural waterway. A new CUNY Institute aims to keep the area resilient for years to come.
We're at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, looking out over the interior of the bay, but with the rockaways in the background. It's a good vantage point to see all of the different pressures and opportunities facing Jamaica Bay. Both the human and the natural communities that live in and around the bay are facing pressures like stronger storms, coastal floods, drier spells in the summer, things that stress the habitats and stress the people that live in and around the bay. We come to expect a lot of things from our coastal zones: public access, recreation, also commerce. There are sort of patterns of development and conservation, but in many cases those are competing uses. What we have to do now is try to figure out a way to reimagine these places and bring humans and nature into harmony. The Science and Resilience Institute is a partnership for learning. We're trying to bring together scientists who have a very objective look of the past, present, and future with the many public agencies that manage the bay. Over 30 different agencies have jurisdiction in the bay. But we're trying to create a space where the research that we're doing actually makes it into the hands of those people who are the stewards of the bay.
The Science and Resilience Institute provides a framework for coordinating a lot of that research that was just happening in just bits and pieces around the bay. Now we're can focus on not only those individual research projects, but the big picture.
At the core of the Institute is a partnership between the National Park Service, the City of New York, and 9 different universities, with CUNY as the lead institution. Right now we're based out of Brooklyn College. There are at least 5 or 6 different colleges of CUNY engaged in research on Jamaica Bay, and the Institute is a place where they can go and collaborate across CUNY and with people at other universities. We have undergraduate students, graduate students, postdoctoral researchers, and a number of different faculty involved in the Institute. For example, we have Dr. Brett Bronco out of Brooklyn College, who has his student Anessa Lamb looking at different aquatic plant species, different species of algae and seaweed in the bay.
This is the algae that blooms in result of the wastewater treatment and the high nitrogen loading we have in the estuary. And it's beautiful. This is a sea lettuce. In the summer, they can really form these mats. And you can imagine they blanket everything that's underneath and cause a lot of disturbances and ecosystem shifts. If we could somehow harvest this and take it away, and that would act as some remediation of the nutrients in the water. Jamaica Bay has been undergoing eutrophication, which is the increases of organic matter to the system caused by nutrient loading to the system for over 200 years. There's a lot we can learn. It can kind of implement change for the future and promote policy decisions and changes.
We're interested in studying how very dense urban communities can be designed and managed to lessen the impacts on natural systems like Jamaica Bay, so that the people that live in the surrounding communities can continue to enjoy this resource, can continue to enjoy the recreation provided by the bay, but at the same time that they don't harm it. I currently work for the CUNY Environmental CROSSROADS initiative, and that's a new program at CUNY to support interdisciplinary environmental science projects. It's important that hydrologists and engineers and biologists and ecologists and social scientists come together in order to solve environmental problems like the ones that we face in Jamaica Bay.
When I first arrived at Brooklyn College, which was 6 years ago now, that very first semester here, I took a class down to Plum Beach. We collected a lot of data of our own and went back into the classroom to look at it, and And I found that it was what we would call a transformational experience, a transformative experience for these students. A lot of them didn't realize that this really beautiful ecosystem was out here and that it was inside the city, and it was part of their lives whether they realized it or not. But we've made it a point to bring students here as much as possible. It's eye-opening for them, and it motivates them to want to do things to help find solutions to problems that places like Jamaica Bay face.
There are people out here who spend, almost every day in the marshes, fishing, kayaking, bird watching. They start to see some of these patterns of disturbance and response. They start to see change. In a way, one of the most exciting things about the Institute is that we're trying to marry the knowledge that we have from very controlled experiments with the knowledge that they gain through their experience of the Bay. What I'm hoping is that we are building a new partnership between science and society. And in the process, 10 to 20 years from now, Jamaica Bay will be a symbol of resilience that the rest of the world looks at.
Most of the captains, mates, and deckhands aboard the city's watercrafts all got their training at one place, Kingsborough Community College. Their Maritime Technology Program recruits and inspires scores of men and women in the art of seamanship.
If you go on a New York water taxi vessel, a New York waterways vessel, a hornblower cruise vessel, you will find Kingsborough graduates, both as captains, deckhands, and as engineers on all of these vessels. The companies like our graduates because of the hands-on training they get, plus the practical training using the ship simulator. We also give them a diesel class, and they take several classes in electrical engineering, so they're very well-rounded.
All aboard.
Compared to the boat that you all were on last week, this boat is a very simple exercise to drive, even though it looks like it's a handful. Okay, let's get the hatches closed and let's get underway. We get the full spectrum of students. We get students who are ex-military. They come out of the military, they have some GI money they can use. They're looking to retrain and become deckhands or captains, possibly going on a tugboat is where they tend to go, the military guys. We train a lot of police officers and firefighters. It's a good way for them to come and get specialized training and then take it back, and hopefully they can use that training to get into a specialized unit. In terms of students coming out of high schools, we get all types of students. We have students that don't have driver's licenses and come with zero idea of what maritime technology is or what they're expected to do in terms of being able to pilot a vessel or to be able to work on a vessel. For the most part, most of our students go through the program and they're either going to go get a job on one of the local ferries or dinner boats or passenger cruise lines, and a lot of them go to four-year schools. We've sent students to Kings Point, United States Merchant Marine Academy, and we spend probably 10 to 12 students a semester go to SUNY Maritime for a four-year degree.
Crouch. Get down low. Do not put your hand under. See how it's going under? Yeah.
Captain Jose Baez was a former student here at Kingsborough who was sometimes unsure of what he could do and didn't think he was a good student, but it was actually the very opposite. He was what every professor wants to have as a student. He worked very hard, he cared about his grades, and more importantly, he saw that this was a way for him to get a career, to go and become the captain of a large dinner boat and possibly take him even further.
I am a CLT here. I'm a college lab technician. When I graduated high school, I ended up enrolling at Kingsborough and spoke to a couple of the instructors, and they told me about the industry, told me about what they teach here, and I said, I want to try it out. There was other guys here that took me under their wing and showed me a lot of different things, engineering end of it, the driving end of it. So there's more to driving a boat than just steering behind a wheel. There's basic seamanship, line handling, knowing what's wrong with an engine if something were to go wrong, basic maintenance, how to work properly and safely. And then I graduated, and a week later, Started over at water taxi as a deckhand. From water taxi, I moved on a couple years later to hornblower, where I'm now a captain. And now I am responsible for the vessel and teaching the crew, same thing that we teach here.
Come forward on the port engine. Port engine forward.
Being on the water is beautiful. I want to be a captain of a boat and to go all around the world delivering, whether it's trading or whatever the case may be, you know. I want to be able to drive boats and fix boats as well.
CUNY has really been generous with us in that we've been able to keep our classes relatively small, and so that gives us the ability to have very specialized instruction and a really good student-to-teacher ratio. Okay, so today's scenario, we have 4 separate vessels. We are all in Lower New York Harbor. The exercise for today is I want you to pilot your vessels from your current location, northbound, under the Verrazano Bridge, and into Lower New York Harbor. The ship simulator is something that Kingsborough is very proud of. It was developed with Buffalo Computer Graphics and Kingsborough Community College. We have 4 individual ships, and the students can pilot the ships using specialized controls that we developed with BCG. It's a extremely specialized piece of equipment. It features radar, electronic chart plotting, a full console with engine controls, steering controls, autopilot. So it's very much mimics what they would use on a modern vessel. It's become such a successful program for Buffalo Computer Graphics that the U.S. Army, the United States Coast Guard, and the U.S. Navy have all adopted the Kingsborough simulator into their programs. So we're really proud of it. It's been a really good experience for myself and for the college to develop the simulator. Right now it's estimated that the next, I believe the next 10 to 15 years, there's a very large need for all types of maritime graduates. The Gulf of Mexico is drying up a little bit because the price of fuel is dropping, but things like ferry routes, dinner boat routes, and engineers are in great demand. They say that the maritime engineers will be in great demand for the next 20 years, according to the MARAD administration. So the field is booming. We think that we're at the forefront of training students to get them jobs when they leave here in New York City. We do have students that, we have them in Dubai now. We have one that's working off the coast of Nigeria. But by and large, we are trying to get them to stay local and go to work for local companies in and around the harbor.
Steve Duncan is an urban historian and photographer who's explored sewers and underground water sources from around the world. Here's a rare look at what lies beneath our feet.
So close to home, and yet you pop down 20 feet. It's a totally new environment that you'd never think of. You just feel a sense of awe. It's dead quiet, and you feel like you're the last man on earth. And that's incredibly rare in New York. I try to look at cities and their infrastructure by actually going into it. I try to see it close up. And the reason I think that's important is because we create urban places by making infrastructure. I started grad school in California for history, and I came back to New York for grad school at CUNY. And when I came here, I fell in love with New York, and that was why I started exploring.
I know you're not responsible for his feelings. But when you say these things, are you threatening someone? Right.
At first, I was treating it very much like archaeology, where I was trying to find places where the past was preserved more clearly as a time capsule.
Nice. This first municipal rapid transit railroad of the city of New York, suggested by the Chamber of Commerce, authorized by the state, constructed by the city. I do kind of wish they made more subway stations like this. Part of what's so pretty about it, though, is is design that just really doesn't work for modern trains. This is a beautiful curve, but since the 1950s, the train cars themselves have been longer, so it's really hard for them to go around such a tight curve.
I began to look at the city in a whole new way, and I realized that when I looked at an old map and I saw historic streams running through the city, or what would become the city, when I looked at an old map from 300 years ago and I saw those historic streams, they hadn't disappeared. They had been reshaped over time, but those flows of water were still in some way flowing through the city today. And if I could understand that, I could understand more about how the city works today. This is the water from the natural stream. It's clearly pre-urban New York. It's the natural landscape forcing its way through. The work that I do these days combines historic preservation approaches and infrastructure analysis, mostly around historic streams and sewers. I call myself a sewer historian. The Minetta Brook flowed through Greenwich Village back when Greenwich Village was a separate village from New York. It was a farming community way north of what was then New York, which was at the very bottom edge of Manhattan Island. And back then, up until about the mid-19th century, the Minetta Brook was above ground and it flowed right through this intersection at 5th Avenue and 12th Street. The Minetta Brook actually started from two separate streams, and so this was the eastern branch flowing through and then flowed underneath the site of what's now the First Presbyterian Church. Now, the First Presbyterian Church was built in the 1860s. So right around the 1860s was when the Minetta Brook disappeared from the surface of the city. I've talked to the archivist here at First Presbyterian Church, and he tells me that still, when it rains heavily, the basement underneath the corner where the Minetta Brook once flowed will flood. So that is the Minetta Brook poking its head up again. Let's walk over towards 6th Avenue, follow that flow of water. There's an above-ground clue here that I really particularly like because it's really different from most of the things that I look at. And that's the shape of the buildings here. It's at this weird angle. The reason it's at this weird angle is because the Minetta Brook was at a weird angle. And when this building was built, the Minetta Brook was still flowing right here. Being good New Yorkers, they wanted to make the most profit they could, build as much as they could on that lot. And again, if it was 170 years ago, I'd be standing in the brook right now. Here we can open this up and see down a little more easily. We can see that beautiful Minetta water, sparkling, well, not so pure and clear. When there's more natural stream water, that means that there's a real possibility of daylighting that water and bringing it out, separating it out from the sewage, and letting it flow above ground again as a natural stream. That means relieving pressure on our sewage system. Of course, at the same time, it also decreases costs for us bringing in fresh water from upstate that we currently bring in to do things like water gardens and water trees in our parks. The more I've gone underground and have explored wastewater systems, especially, the more I've seen how much we are affected by historic and present-day infrastructure systems. And of course, the most obvious is in the case of flooding. Combined sewer overflows that happen approximately 50 times a year right now in New York City, where untreated sewage gets released into our harbors. So what I would like to do is work to make a lot of these invisible underground infrastructure systems more visible. Yeah, looks pretty good. Just the ability to see something helps us care for it a little bit better. And so I think that citizens in general are able to understand how cities can reshape their environment. And that helps empower us to make cities into what we want them to be.
When you're in the dark, you got this blank canvas to play with. You can choose where to put light and how to make that space appear.
Creek, which crosses through Brooklyn and Queens, is one of the most polluted waterways in the nation. So what's being done to clean up the creek?
Newtown Creek is a tributary of the East River, and it's heavily polluted because it has a very long history of being an industrial waterway, and it continues to be a working waterway today. This is Jesse Miller. He is an environmental science student extraordinaire at LaGuardia Community College. Willis Elkins from the Newtown Creek Alliance and the North Brooklyn Boat Club, and he's a collaborator with LaGuardia Community College. And we are on our way to Dutch Kills, which is a little inlet that's behind LaGuardia Community College.
Gotta watch our head going through here.
So we're going to look at the amount of dissolved oxygen and the limit for the water to be something that organisms can safely live in is 3 milligrams per liter. So at about 4 to 5 milligrams per liter, they start getting really stressed and have trouble with growth and reproduction. It is 0.9 milligrams per liter.
Wow, yeah, that's surprising.
That's actually really low, especially for surface. Let's see what it is as we go out further. There was a major oil spill in 1978 that deposited a great deal of oil in the bottom sediments, which continues to be an issue for the aquatic organisms. The EPA designated the creek a Superfund site. What that means is that the responsible parties have to pay into a fund that will help clean up the creek. One of the other major pollution issues here is the CSOs. Those are the combined sewage overflow pipes, and there are a number of them in Newtown Creek.
On the back wall, that's the CSO we mentioned, known as BB026 is the formal name of it. So it's the 4th largest CSO in Newtown Creek, and it's something like over 200 million gallons a year of sewage and stormwater that come out of there.
When we have major rainfall events, the water treatment plants can't handle the amount of water that's coming to them, so some of that will go directly into our natural waterways. You're adding fecal bacteria, Enterococcus, to the water. You're adding trash to the water, chemicals, nutrients, and what happens is a number of organisms, such as phytoplankton, what we think of as algae, they will live off those nutrients and they'll multiply massively. So they'll block out the light that everyone else needs to live. And when they die and decompose on the bottom, the decomposition process takes the oxygen away from everything else. Newtown Creek is actually very narrow. And due to that, the sewage that comes in through these pipes is more likely to stay and settle in the sediments than it is to be flushed out with the tides. 3.23. Much better. But you see the difference as we came out where you get some kind of flow. The EPA deems water inaccessible for recreational uses if it's above a certain level of Enterococcus. And that's actually what we test for on a weekly basis. And we'll be able to use this in conjunction with what the EPA has collected in order to look at what the levels of sewage indication are, what the levels of Enterococcus are over a long period of time. And then they will go ahead with a cleanup of the creek. One of the reasons we started doing research at Newtown Creek and doing water quality testing with the local organizations like Newtown Creek Alliance, like North Brooklyn Boat Club, like Harbor Lab, was to get the students out into their community and to let them see how much biodiversity is in their backyard. I had a student come down and look and say, there's a sea anemone there. I see crabs, I see comb jellies, I see fish, and they were shocked. They never expected to see anything like this in Newtown Creek. They thought it was just a smelly, ugly body of water. One of the things that Newtown Creek Alliance is working on with us is the idea of turning some of this area into something that's more accessible for the public.
There's only two legitimate access points. One was the nature walk and the other is like at the mouth of the creek. So for all of the Queen Shore and all the spots back in the creek, there's no place where people are encouraged to get to the water. It's been a big issue because it's also, if no one can get to it or see it, then no one's going to care about it or have any connection to the water itself. These guys have carved out their own little spot up here where they have the chairs and they have a kayak. You know, it's just guys that are working at this facility. So, you know, even though it's not the cleanest water, people are still drawn towards getting access to it. So Dutch Gills has a lot of potential in the future of both restoration environmentally, but also in terms of access, because you have all these schools that are near the end of it, all these bridges and a lot of businesses. So there's a lot of potential to create more access to this waterway.
Definitely the water is improving. People are becoming more cognizant. The people that live in the neighborhood keep an eye out for industries dumping into the creek. And we've actually found a number of people dumping into the creek, flagged them, and reported them to the DEC. And that's really helped. Just the citizen kind of watch has helped a great deal. We're also involved in a number of projects on bioremediation. For example, we're working with the Newtown Creek Alliance to establish cages of rib mussels. And rib mussels are natural filter feeders. They naturally filter the water. This is the Intertidal Wetlands Project from LaGuardia Community College, and this is Professor Sarah Duran's project. And you can see that the grasses here, they're all native grasses from Newtown Creek. They provide a habitat for mussels, for a lot of other organisms. They're part of the whole ecosystem. I think one of the most important things is to get our next generation out here, get them interested in our local waterways, see where the water that gets cleaned and we depend on for life comes from. And one of the best ways to do that is to bring them out of the classroom, get them out on our waterways on a canoe, get them collecting water samples and testing it, seeing what's in there, seeing the organisms, and get them to love it as much as we do.
That's our show for today. For more information on what you just saw, check out our website at CUNY.TV or log in to our Study with the Best Facebook page. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.